Like, so let's see your hands. Would anyone like to kick us off? That would be great. Sir, straight ahead of me with the oppressed man. Any men wanting to speak, you're very welcome tonight. Tell us who you are as well, if you don't mind waiting.
I'm Nick Cameron, and I've got a question to do with oil. Hardly any of you mentioned it tonight, and in this Business for Scotland leaflet, you talk about the remaining barrels of North Sea oil. Why do you only concentrate on North Sea oil? That's a no-campaign scare story. There's the Clare oil field on the Atlantic coast, the biggest oil field in the world. There's only 20% of the area being explored, 80% not explored, and there's 100 to 150 years worth of oil, at least, depending on the rate of extraction, on the Atlantic side. So why is the Yes campaign not getting up and telling the people that what's sitting in the North Sea was compared, a geologist described what's in the North Sea as only a basinful compared to what's on the Atlantic?
Thank you very much. I think we'll probably take that one in the chin, but who wants to take the answer? Michelle, do you want to go for Business for Scotland?
Yeah, I thought I should, since it's a Business for Scotland leaflet. I mean, of course, you're absolutely right, but remember, this is a political campaign, a look at the amount of deniers we already have around the discovered oil in the North Sea. Sir Ian Wood, only the other day, as I mentioned, forgetting the very report he'd written in February in which he described how much oil was there. We know, or we believe, that there's certainly a considerable amount of oil elsewhere, whether it's Clare, whether it's in the Clyde Basin and so on. You're absolutely right. However, to claim that and say in leaflets there is definitely, we cannot do that, and that would be used, in my view, by the No campaign to try and undermine our case. It's a kind of death by 1,000 cuts, pick. Now we know that, but the important point is, as I made earlier, oil is fantastic, it's a fantastic bounty for Scotland, but it's not the only thing we have. To me, it's equally important when we look at it in business terms that we recognise the strength we have also in onshore sectors, and also recognise the opportunity of how we grow these onshore sectors as well, how we increase our exports, how we grow a whole range of other businesses and ambitions we hardly even talk about, for example, technology, life sciences and so on. So I hope that answers your question, but I do agree with you.
Let's go to Tasmina.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Andrew. Michelle's already made all of the fantastic points. I think it's important to note, in terms of this campaign, that oil for us is simply the icing on the cake. And it's important that we make that point because, everybody else seems to be getting hung up about oil. Yes, we have 60% of the EU oil reserves, 25% of the EU's renewable energy potential, which is absolutely fantastic. I say the point to be making in terms of this campaign to win it is, let's ask Westminster what they've been doing with all of the revenue they've got from the oil in all of the years that we've been sending money down to Westminster. And the important point is that bar Iraq, we are the only oil-producing nation in the world not to have saved a penny. Right. So the question comes right back to one of who's best placed to make decisions for the people of Scotland. And I believe the argument comes full circle to, let's take right now, let's not wait 10 years, as people say, well, I'm not ready for it yet, maybe the years come. I say, no, now. Why leave it to them to spend more of that money, more of that revenue, on not saving for the future of this nation, but spending it on themselves? The key point is, let's not get hung up on it. We know we're a vastly wealthy country. The question for us is, and the challenge for us is, let's make sure we do right by the people of Scotland when we have control of those funds.
Yes, I just wanted to say that why get so hung up, as Tasmina said, about the oil? In any event, if we become independent, we'll be able to believe in ourselves so much that by the time the oil runs out, we would have invented something else.
Thank you very much. Sir, you want to go there?
Right, you were indicating that there wasn't proven reserves in the Atlantic coast. In Schiehallion oil field there's 340 million barrels. In Loyal oil field there's 85 million barrels. You've also got other oil fields, Rosebank, Lochnagar, Strathmore, Solon and Victory, as long as a whole load other. And that's only with 20% of the area being explored. You've had a test bore years ago in the Firth of Clyde, and Now you're banned from drilling in the 50 Clyde because the Americans say it's going to upset their submarines, and that's a directive from the MOD. So if you take it, the Firth and the Atlantic area, they should be shouting, we should be telling everybody, and there wouldn't be one no vote left, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Andrew,
Go ahead,
I'd just like to add one final comment.
Wait till you get the mic so we're on the web,
Thank
remember.
you. Just like to add one final comment to what Tasmina said about the reserves and saving for the future. Listen to the people of Norway who have vast sums of money reserved for future generations because they had the foresight, unlike our friends down south have not had, to make certain that there were funds ring-fenced to provide pensions, to provide care, to provide education, social services for future generations. So I absolutely agree that why wait 10 years? Imagine in 10 years how many millions of children we could help. How many people who are approaching pension age, such as myself, we could not just guarantee the same pension, but offer a greater pension retirement opportunity by ring-fencing those funds for our future development. That's what I'd like to see us do.
Who's next?
Andrew, can I make just one?
Well, go ahead first.
Just a short. I had the pleasure of visiting Norway a few times during my time in the armed forces, a NATO country with a very capable submarine service. And I remember when I was first over there, fantastic country, but I did notice that there was people with, looking very anxious. But I didn't want to insult anybody and ask them, so I finally plucked up the courage and I said to somebody, you've got this great country, you've got so much going for you. Why does so many people go around with anxious faces? And the guy says, well, sir, it's the volatile price of oil.
Very good.
Good.
Who's next?
Come on, get your horns up. Over there. Someone who does what he's told.
Yeah, my name's Kevin. Do you think the pension, the state aid pensions and the age that they're talking about at the moment, do you think that down the line there's actually a plan to basically phase out the pension by raising it to such an extent that you'll sort of have to be in your 80s or your 90s before you get it, and effectively you've actually phased it out because nobody will live long enough to actually come and collect it? Is that possibly a way for the No campaign to win through with that type of doing it by stealth? We'll do away with pensions, but we won't tell anyone.
It's the evidence so far, isn't it? Who would like to take that in the panel, Philippa?
Well, certainly there is talk about the fact that with the kind of pushing towards £1.5 trillion worth of debt, that actually the UK can't support even the meagre pension that it pays. I mean, it's one of the poorest pensions in Europe. And obviously people in Scotland lose out because sadly our people do not live as long.
That's right.
So lots of our people never get a pension at all, and then we have people who get a pension for a few years. And certainly this moving up quickly through the second half of the 60s is meaning that the pension is moving ahead of people. And particularly there's a group of women who thought they were going to retire at 60, and their pension has just moved like a butterfly over a bush out of their fingers over that time. Certainly what the current Scottish Government have said is that what they would do is set up a group of experts who would look at life expectancy and set our pension age in relation to our life expectancy, rather than how it is set at the moment. It's on its way to being 70 at least, which is set in relation to the healthy people in the home counties. What I find a bit bizarre is this terrible talk about how catastrophic it is that people are living longer. I hate to inform any of you who haven't worked it out, but the alternative is really rubbish. And having spent 32 years in the NHS trying to make people live longer, I find it really a wee bit confusing, because in medical school they told us that was the point. But what you see if you look at the graph where they say our demographics is going to fall apart, all countries in Europe face having more older people and fewer younger people. And when we vote yes, we all have to get busy in the bedroom and try and turn that round. But if you look at the demographic line, it is a slow creeping improvement in Scotland. And then you get to 2017 and somebody just put a ruler on it and makes it go like that. Now, I know we're quite good in the NHS, and I certainly believe this creeping improvement, but I don't know what secret they know that's going to happen in 2017, where suddenly our life expectancy is going to go through the roof. So this is their kind of scare story, and it's the same with the business of the immigration we would require to balance that. Oh, we'd need 24,000 more immigrants. Actually, we have a net migration in of 22,000. Alex Salmond was talking about 2,000 extra. What the other side don't mention is we lose 37,000 young people a year who can't settle here. Now, I know some of them want to go and see the world and get a fantastic job up, or maybe they're in the States instead of here. But that's not the case with most of them. They can't get a decent job here. So before we worry about who we let in and who we don't let in, people who come to study here, I would totally agree. You know, they can bring ideas, but we could also try and hang on to our kids, and I think that would make a big difference. So this idea that we are the only country in Europe facing an ageing population is nonsense, and it's something that we should be trying to celebrate. But what we want to change in the future, it isn't a problem living a long time, it's you don't want to live a long time ill. So if we were investing in our young people, in one generation, we would be starting to produce fit older people. And that's a different ballgame altogether.
We'll hear from Joe just before he takes the mic there. I mean, there was a thing that Winston Churchill said many years ago, that a lie gets round to the other side of the world before truth gets a chance to get his trousers on. And I've noticed as I've watched this debate for now a quarter of a century, which is a horrifying thought for me privately, our opponents in this argument are guilty of very, very large lies. And one of the big lies is they describe problems of the way things are now. For example, they say that Scotland's public finances are terrible and unsustainable, or they say that there's too many old people and there's a demographic time bomb and that's unsustainable. And if those are true, then they're describing the way the world is now, which they're in charge of and they have created. And it's only in this funny country of Scotland that people would argue these things are a reason for things to stay the same and the people that are culpable to stay in charge, when in every other country in the world they'd be the very reason to change and the very reason to reform. So that's a warm-up for you, Joe.
Thank you. And I want to thank the gentleman for asking that question, because I might be, by age, the one who's closest to pension sitting on this panel this evening. It is more than pension. It is about creating a comprehensive system of care for our rapidly aging population. And one of the recommendations that I've made to our principal in court at Queen Margaret University is the construction of senior housing, sheltered housing directly on our campus. So those students that are studying health services can literally walk out the front door and then in the front door of senior accommodation to practice their skills and to provide the services that are needed in our community. Did you know, sir, that there is a 2 to 3 year waiting list for senior housing in the city of Edinburgh? This is horrific as far as I'm concerned. In a world where so many families are now satellite families, where they're not living close because, as Philip has said, children are moving to the States or to Australia. So who's going to look after the aging population? Well, I'll tell you who's going to look after it. It's going to be all of us. It's going to be the government. And so we need a system of care that's comprehensive, that's seamless. Because, I don't know about you, sir, but to me it's not about length of life. It's about quality of life. And as I age, I want the quality to increase along with the length. Thank you.
We love a talkative panel.
Yeah. State pensions. There was a Labour councillor at our last full council meeting at Glasgow City Council who claimed that after Scottish independence, if he goes and works down in England as he did during his life, his national insurance contributions, his pension contribution would be lost money. Now, my mother, as I said earlier on, comes from the north of Ireland. She spent the first 8 years of her working life in Armagh, the UK, paying into the UK pension, paying our UK national insurance. And I asked my mother, she was over visiting recently, if she would bring her bank statement and all her other details over. So they're up here, you can have a look at them afterwards. I've scribbled out some of the details. But every month, her UK state pension is paid into her bank account in Dublin, in Ireland, in euros. And it's paid in by an organisation called World Link. Google it. They are an organisation that manage the payment of UK pensions to people who've earned them, who are not living in the UK anymore. Moving on to occupational pensions, you were saying that you were close to pension age. I'm already in receipt of a pension, the Armed Forces pension, and there are many veterans for independence. We're having a meeting actually next Thursday. And do people honestly think I'm out campaigning to lose that? And I have friends who are in the forces who are living in Australia, France, and they are in receipt of that pension as well. And then on to private pensions, and I'm not a pension expert, but one of the great things about this whole campaign is that we're all going out and self-educating ourselves, as people were saying. And there is this talk about cross-border private pensions and recovering them and making them fully funded, etc. But that was for where there was great disparities between countries, and there's not a great disparity between Ireland and the UK. So the Irish Pension Board and our counterparts in the UK were given more time to sort that out, and there was different timescales brought in, etc. But I want to finish on a point about the managing of cross-border pensions. A third of the Europeans' cross-border pensions are managed by people in the City of London. The City of London is a European expert in the management of cross-border pensions. But to manage a cross-border pension with a country that's just up the road, nah, can he do it?
Who would have thought pensions would be so interesting? Yeah, I had the pleasure, possibly dubious, of working in a pensions company for 18 years, and possibly pensions more than any other area has been used by Project Fear, particularly to worry people of a certain age. So there's some fundamentals here. I personally find it incredibly patronising of Westminster to suggest that the Scottish Government, either the current one just now or one in the future, would not meet its obligations. It's one of the most fundamental kind of covenants, if you like, that a government makes with its people to honour the contribution and commitment. And I have no doubt, based on what I've seen so far of our Scottish Government, that they will continue to do that. They are responsible, they have been elected by us, the people, and they serve us, the people. So I don't like that kind of patronising tone. In terms of the arrangements, obviously they're quite complex, and people tend to get worried about things where they don't need to. Of course, you know, as occupational schemes, as Fergal points out, well, it doesn't matter where you live. People retire to Spain, they get paid their pension and all the rest of it. In terms of the funding, I mean, the proposal at the moment is that pensions will continue to be funded by out of taxes raised. We're not talking at the moment about building a big kind of pensions fund, regardless of whether that's a good idea or not, because actually that would require a lot of complex thinking around transitional arrangements, regardless whether it was UK or independent Scotland. Given that that is the case, and therefore they're being paid out of taxes raised, where would you rather live? Would you rather live in a country where you're raising more money per head of population, or where you're raising less? So it's kind of there's an obvious point here. Just to finish off on the cross-border thing, now again, this was used as a scare story, but the whole point of that, it was driven by protecting pensioners. The European Union didn't introduce legislation that they would immediately enact to make pension schemes fall apart. It's to protect pensioners. Now, given that, that is why they have transitional arrangements for these cross-border arrangements. That's why they give them time to put their house in order, because as we know, many pension schemes haven't set aside sufficient funding. It's all about protecting pensioners. So the very idea that uniquely, if Scotland votes to invoke its sovereign right and become an independent nation, it would be used to pull the rug away from pensioners is just completely ridiculous and completely untrue. It's a fundamental thing. Your pensions, to my mind, based on my knowledge of 18 years in a pension company, are safer in an independent Scotland because of the macroeconomic picture than they are in continuing with the UK. And as Philippa correctly pointed out, actually our pensions level are very poor.
Okay. And I'm looking for hands for the next question, so do indicate you can. Thank you.
Just wanted to add, and look at us, this is classic. We are sitting waiting for Westminster to decide, a government we didn't elect, I would add, to decide what the pensionable age should be, what welfare we're going to be entitled to, what the Scottish budget is going to be. Why, oh why do we not think that we should take all of this within our own control? And that's the only point I want to make. This is fundamentally about democracy, and what we do not want to see increasingly happen, and Labour seem to be quite happy for it to happen, is for policies to come out of Westminster only for the Scottish Parliament to have to act as a mitigating chamber. That is not the function of the Scottish Parliament. The function of the Scottish Parliament should be to deal with all matters that affect the people of Scotland. So that is why this moment in time for us is so important, so that we're not sitting waiting for people who we didn't elect to make decisions that affect ourselves, our families and our future.
Go to the lady.